How to trigger an avoidant to chase you without saying a word. Nothing pulls an avoidant closer faster than the moment you stop trying to pull them at all. When someone is avoidant, chasing them only confirms their greatest fear. That intimacy means losing themselves. But the moment you shift your energy, the moment you stop performing for their attention and start anchoring yourself in your own value, everything changes, because avoidant people don't respond to pressure. They respond to freedom. They respond to someone who isn't waiting for them to choose, but continues choosing themselves. If you want an avoidant to move toward you without saying a word, you do it through presence, not persuasion, through standards, not speeches, through emotional self-control, not emotional pursuit. You create a gravitational pull by living in a way that says, I'm here, I'm open, but I'm not waiting. When you stop stretching yourself to close the gap, they start noticing the space. And when the space feels calm, empowered, and self-respecting, not punitive, they feel safe enough to step into it. The secret isn't being colder. It's being clearer. It's not playing mind games. It's playing by your truth. When your energy says, I want connection, but I won't abandon myself for it, you become the person their nervous system can finally relax around. And relaxed people reach. Relaxed people choose. Relaxed people chase, not because they're pressured, but because your self-worth pulled them in. That's how you draw an avoidant closer, without saying a single word. When you stop chasing an avoidant and instead create space they feel safe entering, you shift the entire emotional dynamic between you and them. Avoidant individuals tend to withdraw not because they don't care, but because closeness has historically been associated with overwhelm, loss of control, or emotional danger. When someone pursues them intensely, even with good intentions, it activates that old wiring. If I get too close, I'll be consumed or trapped. The irony is that the more you reach for them, the more they instinctively feel the need to protect themselves by pulling back. So the key is not to convince them to come closer or to explain why you're safe. It's to let your behavior quietly demonstrate that closeness with you doesn't cost them their autonomy. Creating space doesn't mean being cold, punishing, or distant. It means stepping out of the frantic energy that says, I need to respond, and replacing it with an energy that says, I'm grounded and I'm okay. Avoidants scan for emotional pressure. The way some people scan for red flags, they can feel when someone's sense of peace depends on their attention. When your emotional stability stands on its own 2 feet, you neutralize their fear instead of triggering it. That shift in energy, calm instead of anxious, receptive instead of demanding, creates a subtle but powerful gravitational pull. This space is not about manipulation or attempting to lure them back through silence. It's about giving both of you breathing room to show up authentically. Avoidants often need time to process their feelings, especially positive ones. Closeness can feel overwhelming, not because they don't want it, but because they need a slower pace to feel safe. When you back off gracefully without bitterness, it communicates non-verbally that you trust the connection enough to stop micromanaging it. That alone reduces their internal alarm system and makes reaching out feel like a choice rather than a response to pressure. Your ability to hold space is a form of emotional leadership. Instead of trying to pull them toward you, you create an environment where they can move naturally. Think of it like opening the window instead of forcing the door. You're providing a gentle invitation rather than a shove. The more you root yourself in your own life, your own joys, and your own rhythm, the more you show that you're not seeking rescue and you're not asking them to complete you. This kind of independence is magnetic to avoidance because it removes the fear that they will be swallowed by someone else's emotional needs. When you stop chasing, you also start noticing your own patterns. Were you reaching for them to soothe your anxiety? To seek validation? To stop worrying about the unknown? When you redirect that energy inward towards self-care, friendships, goals, you become less reactive and more intentional. The absence of pursuit becomes an expression of emotional maturity rather than emotional withdrawal. Avoidants are hypersensitive to intensity, but they are also deeply drawn to emotional steadiness. The more self-contained you become, the more you stand out as someone who won't overwhelm them. Creating space doesn't just affect the avoidant, it transforms you. You begin to understand that your worth isn't measured by someone's quick responses, reassuring words, or consistent pursuit. When you stop chasing, you reclaim your personal power. You regain the ability to pause before acting, to choose responses instead of defaulting to impulses. And while you're doing that, the avoidant experiences something rare, the feeling of wanting without being pushed. That feeling is what inspires them to make a move on their own. Avoidants often reconnect when the environment feels emotionally neutral, not overly invested, not resentful, and not detached. Emotional neutrality gives them the clarity to notice their own desire instead of reacting to yours. When you're calm and present in your own world, you create a space where they can miss you. Missing someone requires room. If you're always filling the space with effort, messages, check-ins, reassurance attempts, or emotional cues, there's no opportunity for longing to develop. This space also allows them to see your value more clearly. When you stop chasing, your actions say, I know my worth and I don't need to convince you of it. That silent confidence often succeeds where words fail. Avoidants respond not to demands, but to demonstrations. They gravitate toward people who respect their boundaries while simultaneously respecting their own. And when you hold that balance, you become the person who doesn't threaten their independence and doesn't abandon their own needs either. The most powerful thing you can offer an avoidant is the freedom to come closer without fear. Freedom paired with warmth, space paired with openness, stability paired with softness. It's not the absence of interest, it's the absence of pressure. And that's what allows them to finally exhale, to feel safe, and to move toward you because they want to, not because you asked. Leading with your energy instead of your effort is about understanding that attraction is not built through trying harder, doing more, or constantly proving your value. It's built through the silent cues you carry, your posture, your emotional tone, your sense of self, the way you move through the world when no one is watching. Avoidant individuals are especially sensitive to these nonverbal signals. They don't respond to force, they respond to the feeling you create around them. When your energy is calm, centered, and confident, you become someone they can approach without fear. When your effort is frantic, overreaching, or fueled by anxiety, they instinctively retreat because the intensity feels unsafe. Effort is what most people rely on when they feel insecure. It shows up as over-communicating, over-explaining, over-texting, planning everything, filling every silence, or trying to anticipate the other person's needs before they even express them. This kind of behavior often comes from a good place, a desire to connect, to reassure, to avoid losing someone. But avoidants interpret it as emotional pressure. To them, heavy effort feels like expectation, and expectation feels like responsibility, and responsibility feels like a trap. Your energy, on the other hand, carries a very different message. Energy is internal. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth without needing to advertise it. It's the emotional steadiness that isn't shaken by a delayed text, a moment of distance, or a lack of constant validation. When your energy is grounded, you communicate non-verbally that you are whole, flexible, and deeply secure. Avoidants don't run from this kind of presence. They relax into it, often without even realizing why. Leading with your energy means you stop trying to earn someone's affection and instead let your truth speak through your behavior. For example, when an avoidant pulls back, effort might make you chase or demand answers. Energy allows you to give space gracefully, not in punishment, but in confidence. When you do this, you're saying through your actions, I know who I am, and I don't need to pull you closer to feel stable. That kind of self-possession is profoundly attractive because it creates safety. Avoidants want closeness, but only with someone who doesn't suffocate them. When your energy says, I desire connection, but I don't need constant reassurance, they feel free to come toward you at their own pace. And paradoxically, they do. Your energy becomes a magnet, not a forceful pull, but a quiet, irresistible draw. Another aspect of leading with your energy is staying rooted in your own life. When you rely solely on effort, the relationship becomes your main project. You pour everything into it, sometimes to the point of losing yourself. Avoidants can sense when someone's world revolves around them. And while some people find that flattering, avoidants find it overwhelming. But when you are full, full of goals, friendships, passions, routines, dreams. You radiate a sense of richness that doesn't lean on them for completion. This creates an aura of independence that is deeply compelling. Your energy also communicates boundaries without ever needing dramatic conversations or ultimatums. You don't chase someone who goes cold. You don't beg for attention. You don't collapse into insecurity when things feel uncertain. Instead, you continue living, loving, and showing up for yourself. This is not indifference. It's emotional maturity. It says, I'm open to you, but I'm anchored in me. That balance is what makes you stand out in the avoidance world. Leading with your energy means embracing subtlety. It means understanding that the strongest messages are the ones you don't say. For example, being warm when they're present, but not demanding when they're distant. Being responsive, but not reactive. Being curious, but not intrusive. Being connected, but not consumed. These micro signals are powerful because they create a rhythm that feels safe, closeness without pressure, attention without neediness, interest without urgency. This shift from effort to energy also transforms your emotional availability. When your efforts are fueled by fear of losing them, fear of not being enough, you send a message of instability. But when your energy is rooted in self-worth, you send a message of security. Avoidants are drawn to people who can hold their own emotions without leaning too heavily on them. They value someone who can sit with discomfort rather than chase reassurance. When your emotional center remains steady, they feel a pull toward you because you represent something rare, a relationship that doesn't cost them their freedom. Leading with your energy is ultimately about alignment. If your words say, I'm confident, but your behavior says, please don't leave, the avoidant feels the disparity. But when your energy and your actions match, when you truly embody calm confidence, they feel the authenticity of it. And authenticity is magnetic. They may not consciously understand why they're drawn to you, but they will feel it. They'll sense the difference between someone who is chasing connection and someone who is simply grounded enough to attract it. This is how you inspire an avoidant to approach you without pressure, without persuasion, and without pushing. You don't do more. You become more. You let your presence, not your pursuit, be the thing that draws them in. Staying open, but not waiting, is a delicate balance, and it's one of the most powerful forms of emotional alignment you can embody when dealing with an avoidant. It means holding space for a connection without suspending your life for it. It means being receptive without being dependent, hopeful without being attached, interested without being invested in an outcome you cannot control. This balance communicates to an avoidant something they rarely experience, the freedom to approach without the fear that stepping closer will make them responsible for your emotional world. Avoidants often retreat when they sense that someone is waiting for them. Not waiting doesn't mean giving up. It means refusing to pause your life in anticipation of someone else's next move. People who wait usually fall into one of two patterns. They either freeze emotionally, checking their phone, overthinking, constantly monitoring the other person's behavior, or they give everything their attention except themselves. Both patterns create a silent pressure. Even if you never say, where is this going? Or why haven't you texted me? An avoidant can feel the weight of your expectation. It makes them tense, and when they're tense, they retreat. On the other hand, staying open communicates something entirely different. It means you're emotionally available, receptive, warm, and responsive, but only to the extent that the connection also meets you. There is no surge of anxiety driving you to fill the silence. There's no emotional vacuum created by waiting. There's presence, there's ease, there's the subtle message that says, I enjoy you, but I'm not dependent on you. That message calms the avoidant nervous system and creates a natural bridge for them to keep engaging. When you stay open, you allow connection to be possible. When you refuse to wait, you keep your life expanding. It sounds simple, but it's transformational. Because a person who is living, growing, laughing, learning, spending time with friends, nurturing their passions, and investing in themselves carries a completely different energy than someone who is quietly holding their breath for a text, a gesture, or a sign. Avoidants notice that difference. They're drawn to people who don't lose themselves in the presence or the absence of someone they care about. There's also a psychological truth at play. People desire what feels valuable. When your life continues to move with or without someone, your value elevates naturally. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're being true to self. You become someone they can join, not someone they have to rescue. You become someone they want to move toward, not someone who is waiting at the finish line tapping their foot. Staying open means you respond to messages with warmth instead of coldness. You show appreciation for moments of closeness instead of punishing distance. You're approachable, and your energy feels welcoming. But you don't rearrange your entire schedule for them. You don't make them the sun of your universe. You don't shrink your world out of fear of losing them. This balance creates an environment where they can experience connection without feeling suffocated, and they often step forward because the pressure has lifted. Not waiting also prevents you from falling into emotional limbo. When you keep living, you create momentum that benefits you regardless of what happens with the avoidant. You feel more fulfilled, more confident, more grounded. That stability changes how you show up. You become less reactive, less anxious, less dependent on external reassurance. You become someone who is choosing their life, not someone who is passively hoping to be chosen. That shift alone changes the entire dynamic. The subtle truth is this: avoidants tend to approach people who hold on to themselves. They are not drawn to emotional self-abandonment. They are drawn to emotional self-possession. When your life continues, when your happiness doesn't hinge on their next move, when you stay available but not suspended, you represent a secure presence. Something most avoidants deeply want but often fear they won't find. Staying open without waiting also signals emotional generosity without emotional sacrifice. You give without losing. You care without clinging. You allow without controlling. This teaches the avoidant through your behavior that intimacy with you isn't a trap. It doesn't demand their constant attention or reassurance. It simply invites them to participate. In this state, you aren't chasing. You're not pushing. You're not anxiously anticipating, you're simply aligning with your own worth. And that alignment is what creates the opening for the avoidant to step forward. Because when someone feels free, safe, and unpressured, they can feel their own desire again. That desire is what makes them move. Not because you're waiting, but because you're not. You become the person who holds space without losing space. And that is the quiet force that draws an avoidant closer. Letting your standards speak louder than your words is one of the most powerful ways to communicate to an avoidant without forcing, convincing, or chasing. Standards are not rules you impose on someone else. They're the guidelines you live by that show others what you accept, what you value, and how you expect to be treated. Standards are behavioral, not verbal. They're evident in what you allow, what you walk away from, what you reinforce, and what you embody. And for an avoidant, someone who is hyper alert to emotional pressure, standards are far more effective than speeches because they communicate strength, stability, and self-worth without pushing them into a corner. Avoidants often recoil from conversations that feel like demands or ultimatums. Even if your intention is simply to express your needs, they may interpret it as a threat to their independence. This doesn't mean you shouldn't express yourself. Healthy communication is important, but it does mean that how you demonstrate your standards often matters more than how you explain them. People hear words, but they believe actions, and avoidants especially watch behavior more than they listen to emotional language. When your actions consistently align with your standards, it sends a quiet but powerful message. I value myself, and I only participate in connections that treat me accordingly. For example, if someone becomes distant and you immediately chase, over-communicate, or try to fix the space, you unintentionally demonstrate that your standard for connection is inconsistency, imbalance, and emotional panic. But if you respond with calmness, continuing with your life, maintaining warmth when they reach out, and not collapsing into insecurity, you communicate through your actions that distance doesn't control you. You're not punishing them. You're simply grounded. That alone can shift the dynamic more effectively than any conversation about how you want them to behave. Standards don't require harshness. They don't require you to become cold or detached. Instead, they require a quiet clarity. If someone takes too long to follow through, you don't lash out. You simply adjust your availability. If someone fails to prioritize you, you don't beg for importance. You fill your time with people and activities that reflect your value. If someone sends mixed signals, you don't cling tighter, you center yourself, and the mixed signals reveal themselves as insufficient for the kind of connection you want. Avoidance feels safe around people with standards because standards create emotional order, not chaos. They show that you won't explode emotionally or collapse into neediness. You're anchored, you're solid, you can experience disappointment without losing yourself. One of the most attractive things you can communicate is that you won't abandon yourself to keep someone else close. People who abandon their own boundaries for the sake of attachment inadvertently create a sense of instability. Avoidants especially fear this because instability requires them to constantly manage the other person's emotional reactions. But when they see that you stay true to your values regardless of what they do, you become someone safe to get closer to. Paradoxically, the more consistent you are with your standards, the more likely an avoidant is to step forward because they don't feel suffocated. Standards also eliminate guesswork. When you consistently behave according to what you value, the avoidant doesn't need to decode your intentions. They don't have to worry about hidden expectations or emotional traps. They see your boundaries through the rhythm of your actions, and that clarity allows them to approach without fear. Avoidants often struggle in relationships marked by unpredictability, big emotional swings, dramatic conversations, and fluctuating dynamics. Your standards offer a sense of predictability not through rigidity, but through emotional steadiness. You show up with the same integrity every time. Another essential aspect of letting your standards speak is learning to step back from interactions that don't meet your needs, not out of punishment, but out of self-respect. If someone cancels repeatedly without consideration, you don't guilt them, but you also don't rearrange your world when they decide to show up last minute. If someone disappears and reappears inconsistently, you respond kindly, but don't offer the intimacy that consistency earns. This kind of behavior teaches an avoidant that connection with you is available, but not unconditional in the sense of tolerating disrespect or emotional irresponsibility. Your standards also reveal your security. When someone sees that you're willing to walk away from what doesn't honor your needs, they understand that you're not afraid of being alone. That's compelling. Avoidants are drawn to people who can survive without them, not because they want distance, but because they fear dependency. When you demonstrate that your happiness isn't contingent on their choices, they feel safe enough to make them freely rather than defensively. Letting your standards speak louder than your words means you trust your own behavior to communicate more strongly than emotional explanations. It means you no longer seek reassurance through conversation when your actions can express everything more calmly. You don't argue for your worth, you show it. You don't explain how you want to be treated, you reflect it in how you treat yourself. And in doing so, you become someone an avoidant can approach with confidence because the connection feels grounded, balanced, and free from emotional pressure. Becoming the person an avoidant's nervous system trusts is not about changing yourself to fit their patterns. It's about embodying a level of emotional steadiness that makes closeness feel safe instead of threatening. Avoidants aren't afraid of love. They're afraid of the emotional intensity and expectations that often accompany it. Their nervous system is wired to interpret too much closeness, too much need, or too much emotional demand as a signal to retreat. So the more calm, grounded, and balanced you are, the more their defenses lower without you having to say a single word. Trust, for an avoidant, is not built through dramatic gestures or emotional declarations. It's built through consistency, small, subtle cues that signal reliability without pressure. When you react calmly to their moments of distance, you send the message that you aren't shaken or threatened by space. This doesn't mean you accept unhealthy behavior. It means you respond with maturity rather than panic. The calmer you are, the more their nervous system learns. You don't flood me. You don't overwhelm me. You don't demand a response before I'm ready. Avoidants often fear emotional engulfment. This idea that if they get close, they'll lose autonomy or be swallowed by someone else's needs. When you're secure enough to hold your own emotions, manage your expectations, and stay grounded even when things feel uncertain, you become someone whose presence doesn't activate their alarms. You show them that connection with you doesn't come at the cost of their independence. This calmness, however, isn't passive. It's an active choice. It means you don't catastrophize a delayed text. You don't assume distance means disinterest. You don't let your inner storm spill outward. Instead, you self-regulate. You soothe your own anxiety. You remind yourself of your worth without needing them to validate it in every moment. This level of emotional maturity is magnetic because it signals safety. Safe people are rare, and avoidants are especially attuned to who feels emotionally safe and who feels unpredictable. Being someone their nervous system trusts also means you handle moments of closeness with just as much grace as moments of distance. Many people behave well when things are uncertain, but become demanding when things are going well, and avoidants feel that shift instantly. If closeness leads you to become clingy, anxious, or overly focused on decoding the relationship, the avoidance nervous system responds with withdrawal. But if closeness simply allows you to continue being your authentic, grounded self, they learn that intimacy with you is not something that escalates into pressure. Another crucial part of becoming someone they trust is emotional clarity. Avoidants often grow up in environments where emotions felt overwhelming, unpredictable, or unsafe. When you communicate your feelings calmly, without blame, accusation, or emotional volatility, you show them that emotions don't have to equal chaos. You demonstrate that it's possible to express yourself without weaponizing vulnerability. Your emotional steadiness becomes a safe container that makes it easier for them to express themselves in return. The more you embody stability, the more you help regulate the emotional environment between you. Relationships are co-regulating systems. We influence each other's nervous states constantly. When you stay grounded, you reduce emotional noise. You remove urgency. You create a rhythm that feels predictable in the best way. Predictability is nourishing to an avoidant because it allows them to step forward slowly without feeling rushed. Being someone they trust also means you have a secure sense of self that doesn't rise and fall based on their attention. When they sense that you're not overly dependent on their availability, they feel freer to show up authentically. Your confidence, your boundaries, your self-respect, all of these become signals of safety. They reassure the avoidant that if they move closer, they won't be responsible for propping up your self-worth or managing your inner world. Likewise, you don't punish them for needing space. You don't turn that need into an attack on your worth. You don't respond with emotional withdrawal of your own. You simply let them breathe, and when they re-engage, you meet them with warmth rather than resentment. This kind of emotional flexibility teaches their nervous system that connection doesn't come with punitive consequences. But perhaps the most important element is that you remain deeply connected to your own life. Avoidants trust people who are rooted, those who have purpose, friendships, passions, dreams, routines. A person who is anchored in themselves is less likely to cling, less likely to make the relationship their whole identity, and less likely to collapse under relational stress. Your independence becomes a source of reassurance. They feel that you won't demand what they can't give, that you won't crumble if things shift, and that you won't try to fuse identities in a way that erases their autonomy. Ultimately, when you embody emotional steadiness, openness, and self-respect, you create a sense of internal safety that radiates outward. This is what an avoidance nervous system interprets as trust. You're not unpredictable. You're not overwhelming. You're not dependent. You are the calm in the storm, the balance in the chaos, the person who makes closeness feel like a choice instead of a threat. And when an avoidant finally feels that level of safety, they don't just stop running. They begin to lean in. In the end, drawing an avoidant closer without saying a word is not about playing games, withholding affection, or outsmarting someone. It's about returning to yourself so fully that your presence becomes the very thing that invites safety, curiosity, and connection. You don't force closeness. You inspire it. You don't chase. You attract. You don't bend yourself into someone unrecognizable. You become more of who you truly are. And that version of you, the grounded one, the self-led one, the one who doesn't abandon themselves to be chosen, is the version that creates the deepest gravitational pull. When your energy is steady, when your standards are embodied, when your heart is open but your world is full, something remarkable happens. The avoidant begins to feel safe. not pressured, not cornered, safe. And safety is what allows desire to breathe. Safety is what allows someone who fears closeness to take their first step toward it. You become the calm in their storm, the quiet place they didn't realize they missed, the presence that doesn't demand but still resonates. This entire process isn't just about them. It's about you. It's about rising into your worth, embodying your truth, and remembering that healthy love never requires you to shrink, chase, or lose yourself. The more you step into that truth, the more effortlessly the right people, avoidant or not, will gravitate toward you. Because real attraction comes from authenticity. Real connection comes from emotional safety. And real love comes from two people choosing each other freely, not fearfully. So stay grounded, stay open, stay whole. Let your energy speak. Let your standards lead. And let your self-worth do the quiet, powerful work of drawing the right heart toward yours. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for giving yourself the gift of growth and clarity. Your time and presence matter, and I'm grateful you chose to spend them on something that elevates your life. Take everything you've learned, carry it with confidence, and trust that you already have everything you need within you to create the connections you desire. Keep choosing yourself. Keep showing up with truth and courage. And until next time, take care of your heart, honor your worth, and thank you again for being a part of this moment